Hello folks, this is David Hurley of easychesstips.com, and in this video we're going to look at how you can achieve checkmate when you have two bishops up against a lone king. Now the setup for this problem is taken from Jeremy Silman's book, Silman's Complete Endgame Course, that takes you from beginner to master level of the endgame in chess if you go all the way through it and study it hard. Now, there are two things to be aware of in a situation where you have two bishops against a king. One is that the king could approach your bishop, one of your bishops, and capture it, leaving you with just one bishop and a king against a king. And that is effectively a draw because one bishop cannot checkmate a lone king. The other danger is that you could get yourself into a stalemate situation and the game would end in a draw. Because achieving checkmate with two bishops against a king takes quite a bit of maneuvering. You have to maneuver the king. You have to shepherd him into a corner, and then you have to achieve checkmate in that corner by making one preparatory move, as you will see. If you get it wrong, the game ends in a draw because the king cannot move and is not in check. That is stalemate, and stalemate is a draw. We don't want that to happen, but we do want to maneuver the king into a corner. Now here you see the king is avoiding the corner as much as possible, any corner. The king will stay in the center if he possibly can, because it is impossible to checkmate a king with two bishops when the king is in the center of the board. So your job with your two is to use your two bishops and your king working together to control and limit the options of your opponent's king. So let's start off by bringing the bishops together with a check. So we bring this bishop down to g6, check the king. The king has a few options, but he doesn't want to move towards the corner, so the king will stay in the center of the board. Now we begin to approach with our king. The king here is taking a chance. Can he capture one of those bishops? So now your job is to move away from the king. Moving back here, you create protection here against the king. To approach a bishop, the king would have to come, well, he can't make it. He'd have to come up here. He can't make it at all because there is a nice solid fence. Here. So the king, try as he might, cannot get around this fence. Even if he tries to go this way, the fence works both ways. The king cannot approach the two bishops. And at the same time, the bishops have restricted the king's options. The king also here is beginning to restrict the black king's options. And we will see how we can squeeze the king into a corner in this way by having our three pieces cooperate. Okay, so on we go to the next move. The king moves back into the center, away from the corner. Now his attempt to capture a bishop has failed. And we approach again, further restricting the king's options. The king stays in the center. We now move forward. We step forward with the bishop. Why did we do that? Because we want to keep on restricting the king's options. The king now cannot go to the E3 and E5 square, and also, of course, the E4 square. So the king can't go to these squares, can't go to this square, and our king has approached. So really, the poor old black king does not have so many options. He can go here or he can go here. Okay, where does he go? He goes to c4. So we force the king out of those 4 central kept squares. On we go, further restricting the king now. So blocking the king off from these squares. The fence is getting tighter. Move by move, the fence gets tighter, but beware of getting so tight that you end up with stalemate. So the king cannot break through the fence here. Again, our king is blocking him off. And so once again, the king has just 2 options. Moving him towards the edge. We want to get the king to the edge of the board, and then we'll send him to one or other of the corners. So the next move, the king moves to b4. Next move, bishop, once again limiting the king's options. The fence has tightened, but it is not stalemate because the king can move to the edge of the board. And that is what he does. Okay, on we go. The king approaches. The king moves away from the corner. And now we begin to really limit the king's movement without stalemate. The king can move up here. He has that one option. That's enough to avoid stalemate. So this bishop is acting now like a sheepdog, like a collie dog, making the king move up towards that corner up there. And then the second collie dog comes in and ushers the king forward or up. He only has that one choice. And now we get into, this is called the opposition. The king maintains the opposition. This prevents this king from breaking out here. So the king now has 2 options. We'll follow our main line here and have the king move up towards the corner. It really doesn't matter. The king, there is another line I'll show you in a minute where the king moves down. Whichever way the king goes, checkmate is inevitable if you don't mess up. So here we go. Again, stopping the king from escaping away from, well, this edge here, giving the king only one choice, giving the king 2 choices to move into the corner or to step back into the opposition here. And so the king really does not want to go into the corner, so he steps back. At this point, we now prevent the king from moving further away from the corner. So the king, now the king only has one choice, which is to approach the corner. Now, as the king approaches the corner, we have to go careful. We don't want to end up with stalemate when we're so near to checkmate. So we limit the king's options, but the king does have a move. And his only choice is to move into the corner, and it's in the corner where we can achieve checkmate, but also where the biggest danger of stalemate is. So we have to go careful. The king here, well, it's not his move, but the king here has only one movement option. He can only move here. And so we have to go very careful. For example, this move here would be a killer for white. If the king moves here, that is stalemate. The black king is not in check, but the black king cannot move. So go careful. What do we do instead? We move our bishop back. This is the intermediate move. It doesn't change what squares are open to the king. It's called stepping back. Sometimes in chess, you need to step back so that although the position on the board hasn't changed very much, you give the move to the other player. And by doing that, you can achieve your aim. So by stepping back, we now force the king to move into the only square available to him. And from here, we can achieve checkmate. How do we do that? We move the king up. The king claims the opposition. The black king now only has one option: move into the corner. Up he goes. And now from here, what do? We step back. We're not ready yet for checkmate. Then the king is forced to move back to the only square available to him. And now we say check. The king moves to the only square available to him, the corner, and now we can achieve checkmate. How do we do that? Simply by moving our bishop to d5. Checkmate. Let's go back to this maneuver again and see what happens. We control the king. He moves up. We control the king again. He has to move up, but we're not ready yet. We can't achieve checkmate yet, simply because we cannot actually check the king. We need the white bishop to check the king in the corner. The white squared bishop to check the king in the corner. But our own king is blocking the check path. So we're going to have to step back with the bishop. Then when the king steps back, when the king moves to his only square to a7, we achieve the opposition, forcing the king in. But we're still not ready for checkmate because the king can still move here. If we go check here, the king can simply move out into this square. We don't want that to happen when we check the king in the corner. So we do another step back, forcing the king in here. Now we are ready for checkmate. So we check, the king has to go up there, and then we get checkmate. So that's how you achieve checkmate with two bishops against a king. Let's just have a look at some of the variations. So there is a danger here. That's right. There is a stalemate danger here as well, quite early in this variation. We move to c5. What happens if you think, I will get my king close to this king? I'll move him to b5. b5 is a complete disaster because the king is not in check. It's the king's move. As you can see, he has nowhere to go. The king is not in check, and the king has nowhere to go. No legal move. That is a draw. Well done, white. You have two extra pieces over the king, and you have achieved stalemate. Dong! Okay, so the next thing was when the king moved up to a7, but we said earlier the king doesn't want to move near to a corner. So why doesn't the king move to a5? Let's see. He moves to let's move him to a5 instead, and we will see that the same kind of pattern simply occurs in a different way. We simply now move the bishop to c3, then he goes up to a6, and we now usher him up to a7, and then the same pattern that we saw earlier, but with a different series of step backs because the black squared bishop is in a different place. But still, we need to step back. Now we can check, and now we can achieve checkmate. So a similar pattern, but with the black squared bishop operating from a different diagonal. And was there another variation? Yeah, just down here. So what happens if instead of the king moving to a6, the king just goes directly into the corner? Well, if he does that, then we get into a similar situation. So the white king moves to c7 to uncover the checkmate diagonal. We now control and limit the king's movements, forcing him back into the corner. We are not yet ready to try and checkmate the king because this square is open. So we step back. Now the king has to move to a7. Now we check the king. The king has to move to a8. And it's checkmate again. So again, a similar series of moves, but once again operating from a different diagonal. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And that's all from me, David Hurley of easychesstips.com. Until the next exciting chess video. In the meantime, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, bang the bell, like the video, and see you next time.